If you're joining us for the first time, my name is Paul Jantz. Welcome on behalf of the professional partners to our Chewing the Accounting Facts show. I'm with my good mate here, Jason Cunningham. It's a bit like the Brady Bunch down there, if you're viewing us. And you can probably tell we are a little bit out of our studio. So for those of you that don't know, we've got some more problems here in Victoria with COVID cases. So we've gone on the air of caution, and Jason and I are streaming in from our offices today. So Jason Cunningham, welcome, my friend.
G'day, PJ. How are you, mate?
I'm really good, mate. How are you?
Look, I'm pretty pumped. I had an exam yesterday, which was just a hell of a lot of excitement. As you know, I'm an accountant by trade, but also hold a financial services license. And as a result of the wonderful Royal Commission, every financial planner had to do another subject on a code of ethics and FCA, anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism threats, which is pretty much Jamie's sweet spot, to be honest. So I sat an exam, so I had 2 days out of the office, come back, and once again, I see that we are facing the daunting task of potentially being locked down again in downtown sunny Melbourne town.
How'd you go with that exam, by the way? No, actually, let's not do that. Now, just if I could roll the tape back, I would. Going back to episode, I think this is episode 4. So episode 3, we sat there next to each other. We're in our sofas in the studio. There's a bit of, for those of you that don't know us, I'm a bit of a mad blue supporter. Jason's an Essendon supporter. There's a bit of arrogance coming from the Essendon side of the couch, I might just add. And he wanted to sort of go me for a bet.
It was $1.
I'll get that out of the way nice and early. I think Carlton's kicked their high score for the last 7 years, 19 goals. We beat you easily. You owe me $1.
Yeah, absolutely.
I haven't set it in my account yet.
Okay, let's get on to the topic at hand. Let's forget about the footy. No, you're right, PJ. I was mouthing off, and as you can, I like to spend the big bucks, as Jamie would know. And
$1.
Yeah, got the dollar out of the ashtray of the car. And,
yeah, exactly.
There we go.
I'll see you on Sunday. Let's get into today's topic now. It is a really, really topical topic because I suppose for all the firms that are joining us to talk about digital management, talk about digital risk management, we'll chat about, cybercrime and all of these things. And I suppose when we look at some of the stats, initially, we're talking about, cybercrime is up 35% since 2015. Sort of 1 in 10 is being reported every 10 minutes. We're spending about $29 billion just on cybercrime. And, more, I know personally I've been hit by a little bit of credit card fraud and these sorts of things. And it's easy for us just to shut down our credit card, get a new credit card. But I think it goes beyond that with the way that businesses today, and certainly accounting firms today, are operating. 5 years ago, probably not in the cloud. Today, everything is in the cloud. Even today, we're zooming in. So it gives you a bit of an idea of, people can hack in and get certain information. So that's ideally what we're going to talk about today.
And I think, PJ, what we don't realise is you don't realise how prevalent it is until it actually affects you. When it's out of sight, it's out of mind. And I'm going to share a bit later on a couple of incidences that have happened at our firm. But I didn't realise how prevalent it was. I did a story on the living room a couple of years back about cybercrime and went down to the police station at Spencer Street Station, and I was having a chat to the copper there, and he was mentioning that, in countries like Russia, and Jamie or Zahn might correct me if I'm wrong, in countries like Russia, there are actually businesses set up that are actually crooks. And so you go into the building and it's just level after level of cyber criminals that go to work and go out and farm, the internet and all that sort of stuff to actually steal and thieve money. And the guy said, look, he goes, crooks don't go into banks anymore and hold a bank up. What they're doing is they're doing it all over the internet. And he said, one of the things that you'll find interesting is, now the stat's probably wrong, but I don't mind using a stat because it sounds like it's real, right? But he said there's something along the lines of when there's a public holiday in Russia, cybercrime is down 35% around the world. And I said, oh, shit, mate. And so anyway, he took me through all the stats, and then, I'll share with you, instance a little bit later on about what happened in our firm and how these crooks can actually get at you. And I think, despite the fact that this is not sexy, and no disrespect to our two panelists, it's more about a risk cover-off piece. But as accountants, that's what we need to be doing, we can always talk a big game and talk about the upside and where we're taking our business and growing our organisation. And last month, we did it with Melissa David, who was head of engagement and growth at her firm. But I think it's so important as accountants, particularly as we move into the cloud with, cloud-based record keeping and working from home and all sorts of stuff, that we've got to make sure that our data is secure. And I think this topic is crucial.
100%. And I think, for all of you that are online today and going through that process, I know there's a number of firms that are going through that, call it that planning process for financial year 2022. When I used to do all my stuff, it was always risk management was number one on the agenda.
Yeah.
They're the sort of stuff we need to talk about, and we need to have a strategy. And that's ideally what we're going to share today with all of you. Let me introduce you to our two special guests. They are from the West. We've got an international guest, by the way. Always good having an international guest.
Yeah.
All the way from Bali, Jamie Beresford, welcome.
G'day guys, thanks Paul, thanks for having us, Jason.
Nice to see you, Jamie, as always.
And Zahn Nel from Perth, thanks for having us, mate. Thanks for being a part of this, should I say?
No, thanks, Paul. Hi, guys. I wasn't sure who the international speaker is, whether you referred to Jamie and Bali or myself and my South African accent. So, but yeah, it's great to be here. I'm looking forward to it.
See, both work for me. And I know your premier in Perth is trying to siphon you off to a separate country altogether. So, but it's always good. We were just talking about some of the stuff offline. Some people might have been on the line. We were talking about the Panalytics conferences that we've been to, and that's how we sort of know each other, and how Jason and Jamie and Robbo and all the great names of our industry. So again, a really, really good topic to make sure that we continue to talk about and expand on this message. Guys, I'm going to start off with just a simplistic one, because there's quite a few people, and I know we did this as a virtual lunch probably a few months ago now, and we've spoken about it on one of the podcasts. Let's start with a simplistic one. What is cybercrime?
Yeah.
Who would like to kick off?
Yeah, I don't mind kicking us off on that. And it's interesting that Jason mentioned about the counter-terrorism, courses that we need to do. And I sometimes feel like our IT guys need to go to an MI6 course because, as you guys have rightly said, it's shifted from bank robbers face-to-face to be everything being done online. And I think the reason for that is that information and communication technology, or ICT as people refer to it these days, is such an integral part of our daily lives. It's the reliance on it is increasing as well. And it's not just, professionally, but personally at the same time. When we talk about cybercrime, I think the importance there is what I feel is a crime and what you feel is a crime is not necessarily the same thing. So I refer to the AFP. So the Australian Federal Police, they describe cybercrime in terms of two specific categories. One being crimes that's directed at computers or other information communications, such as computer intrusions or denial of service attack. So preventing people from doing anything, basically. And secondly to that, crimes where computers or information communication technology was an integral part of the offence, such as online fraud. Now, that's most probably more where we sit in the case of, the creation and distribution of malicious software, and dishonestly obtaining or dealing in personal financial information. Those are the two things, and obviously unauthorized data or modification and access to data. Those two or three things is what's really the main majority of 90% of cybercrime activity.
Okay. Now, mate, probably a word that I hadn't even probably heard of 6 months ago, but now is being bandied around a little bit, is ransomware. Can you maybe explain what ransomware is? And, there's people on the line that might know, but I certainly didn't know 6 months ago, but it's suddenly people are no doubt talking about that a lot.
Yeah, look, it's a word that's been thrown around quite a bit, Paul. And most probably these days, I think there's a very small percentage of professional service employees that these days won't really know what that is anymore, or what ransomware is. And I think there's statistics that 90-odd%, Jamie, you might have some stats on that as well, or Jason as the statistician among us. I think it's more, just over the 90% or so of all viruses these days are ransomware. And basically, ransomware is a type of malicious software that these cyber criminals use to block you from accessing your own data. And then what these guys do is they encrypt the files. So on your system, they add a few extensions and a few tweaks to it, and then they hold that data hostage, so to speak, until the demand for that ransom is paid. That's the summary of it. If anyone's interested in really looking at a good video online, there's a YouTube video from Cisco. It's called Ransomware, the Anatomy of an Attack. And that's a really good video that actually explains it and how it all kind of gets together. But just one thing I want to quickly say, and it follows on from Jason's comments earlier from his chat to the copper, that we do a lot of work with an insurance company called KBI. And these days they specialize a lot more in cyber insurance.
Yeah.
And it's such a big thing and it's a key thing for any organization. And if you say, what's the number one thing? I would say, make sure you've got cyber insurance that's specific for it. But he's from Canada and he told me the other day that they used to do a lot of work in South America for all the big mines there, and like in Brazil and those places. And the big mine guys used to have ransom kidnapping insurance. So what happened is that their families and kids and etc. got kidnapped, got paid ransom, so they've got insurance against that. Nowadays, that insurance is shifted to cyber insurance, but still ransom. Quite interesting how that's changed.
Yeah, absolutely. Very similar to the story I was telling about, Robert holding up banks, in person.
Yeah.
We're doing it online. Yeah, Jamie, it's no secret you and I have been mates for about 10 or 12 years now. And you're sort of a pioneer in this space when it comes to accounting firms around your business is Practice Protect or the product you have. And I remember you telling me a lot about this sort of stuff back in the halcyon days at a Panalytics conference in Bali. I think by the end of the night you were speaking a little bit of French and a bit of Greek there, various different languages. But Jamie, can you tell us, as I mentioned right off the top, that you don't really think about this until it's happened to you. And as I mentioned, we got infiltrated a couple of times last year, and I'll talk to you about that. But in your experience, how often is it happening, and what sort of firms are getting targeted?
Yeah, and it's good hearing you say that the awareness is built, because I remember having sort of conversations back in the day when the legislation changed, and even with yourself, Jason, talking about cybercrime, people sort of switch off. They think it's something technical and it's about servers and firewalls and stuff that's not outside of their sphere. But you're right, now it's actually happening to people, and people are wanting to sort of understand it. And to a certain extent, it's an ambiguous term. People want to actually understand, well, first of all, how it happens and how to protect themselves. So it's a bit like when, someone has a car accident, right? The first thing people talk about is what the impact was, who died, how bad was it, what did the car look like, what was the wreckage, etc. Yeah. And that's a ransomware is essentially a payload that somebody chooses to do when they get access to a system. But cybersecurity is really about understanding how they got in the first place. Okay, and that's a human issue. It's not such a technical issue, right? These guys, the Russians that you mentioned, or wherever they might be, they're not tech gurus. They're people sitting around that are really good at tricking people. That's what they're sitting there doing. They're not thinking, okay, I need to learn the next thing about how to break into this system. They're thinking, what's the next strategy I can learn to trick someone into giving me information that I need in order to access their systems, and then so I can do what I want with it, which might be ransomware.
Well, now this is the thing, Jamie. This is what I really want to explore. So the IT guys that we're currently using, although I'm going to be speaking to Zahn at the end of this, because I want to, have some conversations around potentially making a bit of a shift. But anyway, that's another conversation. But the conversations we have been having are around that point that you raised there, Jamie. And the inherent danger is when the team, so all of our team members, there's 50 of us here in Melbourne, have all got laptops. And so they take the laptop home and they might jump onto some other site, or they might click on an email in a response to an email, click on it, that's got through our firewall, and they've clicked on it, and then all of a sudden people have got their details. And then, so let me just give you a little bit of an example of what happened in our business. Luckily, we caught it. So we have some clients that are international rock stars, a bit like yourself, JMO, but one of Bali's finest, right? And so we have some clients that are international, and what we do on their behalf is we pay money on their behalf. And we've got a bit of a checking system where one of our senior accountants received an email from a client's brother, right? And it's normal that we would pay, we make a distribution to this guy on a periodic basis. I can't remember if it was monthly or quarterly. And the guy said, hey, it's, Joe Blow, nice, how are you, blah, blah, blah. Can you process this payment? So we went through the normal checking system. So this guy might have been in Spain and our client is in the US. So the accountant contacted the client in the US via email because it's a different time frame and said, hey, would you like us to make this payment to your brother? The email came back and said, yeah, I would. As usual, make the payment, blah, blah, blah. She put the payment into the system and then went into one of my partner's office and he goes, no, this doesn't sound right. And so rang the guy and long story short, he didn't approve it. Now, what had happened when our tech guys got into it, someone had masqueraded themselves as and had read through all this girl's previous emails and noticed that, Joe Blow was the brother of Peter Blow and whatever, and had seen previous dialogue between them and it looked as legit as anything. But when you clicked on the email, you saw what actually wasn't his email. It came up and read Joe Blow, but it wasn't. And we were that close from, paying $5,000 of someone else's money to somebody because the girl at work got tricked. And it wasn't until our business partner, one of my partners said, nah, this can't be right, and made that phone call that we discovered that this is how sneaky and conniving these guys can be.
And Jace, that's probably, I've heard that, a very similar story to that quite a few times. So it's an interesting one where, and again, just to everyone online, sorry, I didn't probably mention this at the start. If you've got any thoughts, comments, questions, you've got the chat bar, and I think there's a Q&A bar down there. Yeah, please throw anything in there because we'll be opening it up to questions pretty soon as well. So if you've got anything you want to ask to the experts and Jason, please throw it on there. Sorry, mate, I didn't mean that.
That's all right. No, that's fine. I'm not an expert.
You know I love you. But Jamie, so that exact scenario there that Jace just went through, what are some of the common things that you would see within accounting firms with cybercrime or cyber attacks?
And also, what are the protocols we should put in place to protect us from this sort of crap?
Sure. So, and that's growing, and that's been something that's happened in the last year. If, going back into 2018, 2019, they get access to a mailbox and they just spray some random email to all of your contacts and try and get them to click on something.
Yeah.
Now it's evolving into what you're saying, Jason, is these more targeted, where they're actually researching who you are and who asks you to pay bills. And that's why accounting firms are great, because they often perform that function for their clients.
Yeah.
Now, really what's happened in that case, Jason, where you refer to it as masquerading, someone's got access to a mailbox, and we call it devil's in the email. When we talk to an accounting firm about their data and protecting and controlling access to their apps, they often will talk about their practice management system, and they'll talk about their file storage, etc. Yeah. It really is. It's all about email. If you get access to someone's mailbox, which is very easy because, and I'll go into that in a sec, but if you've got access to their mailbox, you can see who they're talking to, how they talk, and you can impersonate them as well.
Yeah. So
protecting your mailbox with some multi-factor is essentially how to protect that, Jason. So you'll see that Microsoft are actually implementing some changes now where it's going to be mandatory. So you actually have to enter a code into email to access your email, which is going to stop that kind of brute force attack now, where if somebody gets your password, which isn't too hard if you've typed it in somewhere, and accessing your account, now there's some multi-factor, and Zahn might be able to share a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, we that's one of the protocols we put in place, is we've got that dual factor authentication. So every time we log on outside of the office into 365, we have to do something on our phone and authorize that, yes, so the person would have had to have stolen my laptop and stolen my phone and know my password to get access to it. But that's one layer that we've got. But we've seen that dual factor authentication in pretty much everything nowadays.
Yeah, and now it's becoming a headache, right? Because you've got dual factor authentication sprawl, Jason, where all of a sudden you've got all these tokens and all these codes flying around. And, the thing is, when people are trying to get work done and they've got deadlines, you can't argue with easy. You've got to making life easy for your team members means they're going to be able to manage the security of your firm. Okay, and what's happening now is a technology called SAML and Federation, where you're actually pulling all those two-factor codes together. So you log on once at the start of your day with one set of credentials, and then you go about your day and access all of your different apps from one single platform.
So Jamie, sorry, Zahn, just a quick one and then we'll jump to Zahn. Jamie, in your experience, when we talk about cybercrime and protecting your data and protecting you know, your mailboxes are saying, you know, what are the top 3 infiltrations into firms and getting client data? So what are the top 3 in your experience that have happened? What areas?
I'd say the top 3 is email.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
Okay.
Because that's where your clicks come in. Sure, a bit comes through browsers, through web pages, but it's all email.
Yeah, right. So
yeah, I would agree with that actually. I think there's a few cases where brute force attacks, you know, you saw brute force attacks, which obviously then penetrating a bit deeper, occurred a while back still, but I think something like you guys have now done as well, Jason, 2-factor authentication has completely stopped that. Well, not say completely, 99%, nothing is 100% always, but that's a massive, massive step in the right direction. But one of the things I wanted to comment on, and I noticed someone in the chat said that as well, about their policies on their processes changing.
Yeah.
Whereby if there's a change in bank accounts or a change in the normal process on how you're dealing with a client, where they've implemented a more manual process where you now have to call them before making the payment, or call them to say, like you guys have done, just at the right time. That's now becoming a policy for a lot of firms. And also, going back to the insurance guys for a second, a lot of them request that you have that callback policy in place as part of your process. Otherwise, they won't cover all of those cyber incidences. So they've kind of put those extra layers in place, the multi-factor authentication, 2-factor authentication stuff, but then also one step further as make sure you make some phone calls before you make any payments.
And a lot of the cloud-based accounting software, like I know Xero, I don't know what, 12 months ago, 18 months ago, however long ago it was, they put in their multi-factor authentication as well, because I suspect that they may have been compromised without, talking out of school. But it's just becoming more and more of a way of life. And I think that point that you raised, Mr. Beresford, around making life easier for the team members. One of the things that we talk about in business is how do you reduce the friction or the pain point for the customer? I think it's also important to reduce the friction and the pain point for your team members, particularly in today's day and age where some idiot 18 months ago bit into a bat and coughed and shut the whole world down. Now we're about to go into 5 or 6 days of lockdown potentially in Melbourne. So everyone's packing up and moving, going home again. You just got to make sure, because it would be, you're right. We're, I don't know what we are, 26th of May or 27th of May. We're getting close to the month end. The month end in our business is quite busy, getting jobs done. And we've just come out of our lodgement deadline and we're winding into tax planning, FBT, trust distribution minutes. People are flat stick. And you can see how it's easy for people to just do a quick workaround. And when you're a bit tired and you did see an email, it looks like something, you click on it and bang, you're compromised and the whole bloody house of cards comes falling down.
Yeah. You can't argue with easy.
No, you can't. So what do you recommend? Do you go through an audit process of looking at practices, protocols and procedures? How does the process go? What do you think we should be doing?
Yep. For a couple of things, I'll go on the practical side. Make it easy by giving somebody one single password that accesses everything, or one single set of credentials to access their workstation, their cloud applications, and any server applications, rather than having to distribute when someone starts in your firm, distributing a set of credentials for Xero, distributing a set of credentials for your server, all these different logins, because once you have that sprawl going on, it makes it not just really difficult for the user, but really difficult for the firm to maintain control. When somebody leaves that firm and you've missed a password, or missed an account that they had access to, they could potentially access that after they've left. Now that's going to make it easy for them, right? The second thing, at the end of the day, there's always going to be that 1%. You can't sit there and physically control what one of your team members can do. Now, here's the way to minimize that. The first thing is really, you've got to demonstrate due diligence as a firm, okay? Now, and that's then you're going to hold up in the event that you have an incident, you're going to be covered by your cyber insurer, as Zahn mentioned earlier. Now, a couple of ways to do that. First of all, have an IT and internet usage policy in place that covers remote work specifically. Now, it doesn't need to be War and Peace. I think we've actually got one, and I'll put a link in the chat. But it doesn't need to be War and Peace. But really, all that does is just steps out the standards in your firm of what people should and shouldn't do. Because when you might perceive something to be silly where somebody's clicked on something, but as a firm, you never set expectations that they shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
So giving people the sort of the standards in your firm and what they should and shouldn't do is as much as you can do as a firm owner. If they then go against that, then there's not a lot you can do. But then it's also about providing them with the training.
Yeah.
And I think that your point to that, sorry, Zahn, for a second, just to touch on a couple of those things. Did you say, Jamie, that, and I wrote it down quickly, as an example of a new team member starting, instead of them creating their own passwords, that the firm should give them passwords?
Well, they create their own password, but the point is that there's one set of credentials, which will be a password and a second factor of some kind, like an authenticator app on their phone. They can select what the password is, but there's only one that they need to have. And you can put policy around that. So you can stipulate it needs to be changed every 30 days, or they can only access it from the office.
Yes.
They can only access it between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. Or it can only be accessed from Australia and not from overseas, like countries that Jason mentioned.
Yes.
Having policy around that account, their identity in your firm, is not only makes it easier for them, but allows you to control what's going on. Because in the event something does happen, you've got a log of where that person's logged in, no matter what they're accessing. You can see specifically where they've logged in from, what they've accessed, and you can go back to your client and go, hey, this was nothing to do with us, or whatever the situation is.
That's fantastic. And the second point to that I just want to raise, and Zahn, you may have a comment to this as well, is around once you've got those policies in place, and I think the word you used there was due diligence, how do we make sure, what's the suggestion to the audience listening to how we continue to manage that? It's one thing to have it in place, but as we all know, and no disrespect to HR, but HR are good at putting policies in place, but then how does business owners, partners manage that ongoing due diligence process?
Yeah. Jamie touched on that towards the end of his previous comments there about the user education and the user training. Don't know if you guys seen, there's like this cartoon going around where it was this, on the one hand, in like this boxing ring, you had firewalls, you had two-factor authentication, you had policies, you had rules, you had everything to that we build in from a security perspective that's physical. And then on the other side, there was a guy with a t-shirt that said human error on. And then he said in the other corner, you have Dave. So you have all these things that you put in place, but the user intervention or the user access is still, the user engagement is still such a key aspect to it. So user training and policies on cyber, I think, is a key thing with that. And making that as part of your weekly whips or your monthly whips or your quarterly catch-ups, whatever you want to do from your CPD perspective, cyber awareness, cyber training, security, the policies surrounding that, internet policies, as Jamie's mentioned, that should be a topic of discussion. And a lot of these insurance underwriters, the good ones, what they're actually doing now is they actually incorporate training as part of their cyber insurance policy. And that makes a lot of sense, because what they're doing is that if they help the firms to protect themselves and be better equipped, they'll have less incidences to pay out. So that makes a lot of sense to do that. So they actually embarked on like massive training, employing training companies or merging or acquiring training companies to do the cyber training on their behalf. That reduces the claims.
One of the things that I've just done just personally, and I share this with a lot of the team members, haven't necessarily made a policy, but listening to you guys, I think we need to create some more awareness around training. Is that I just never click on any attachment if I don't know the person and or I don't expect an attachment to be coming. I'm just too frightened to just click on anything, to be honest. But it's, hearing you say it, it sounds straightforward, but I think bringing it to front of mind and just reminding the team, hey guys, this is the number one way people are going to try to get access to our clients' data. I think we need to be quite vigilant around it.
Yeah, it's a very, very good point. Does the working from home now, we've been in all sorts of different lockdowns because of COVID. Does working from home and routers and, some people are living with 4 other people, does that have a complication, or does that, what you suggested there, Jamie, will that mitigate that?
There's two aspects to that. So going back to this trick piece, when people are separated, they're not communicating as well, and you're seeing a lot of people getting tricked because they haven't got that person walking past their office to do that verification piece. So you've got colleagues, mailboxes being hijacked and emailing people because they know they're home, they've read their emails, they know they're working remotely and initiating those conversations. Now, there's a technical aspect as well, which I'll hand across to Zahn on.
The working from home aspect. Yeah, look, I think the thing that we've seen with the working from home is it goes back to the what Jamie mentioned about creating the one login and the one area of working. A lot of people have worked a remote workforce, working in something like a remote desktop. So the idea behind that is obviously controlling that environment. It makes the local environment slightly less risky because obviously you have to log into an environment before you can start working to control it. So for us, that's what we've done with a lot of the clients, is making sure that that environment of logging in, the VPN connections from home, yes, there's significant risks with that when you talk about the local firewalls. And one of the biggest things that people do with their called their local routers is they would still have the default admin username and password. So from a technical perspective, accessing that would be fairly quick and easy for anyone to do. I would wonder how many people actually change their username and their password on their local routers at home. So for us, that would have been one of the first things, make sure that's updated and changed. And secondly, we control the environment that people log into with the two-factor authentication methods.
Is it expensive? How expensive is it to bring in to play this sort of cyber protection?
From a technical perspective, or more the cyber insurance aspect? I mean, two-factor authentication, Google Authenticator is free. It's free as an example. There's no cost for that one. We use a system called Duo, which is also
we do too.
Yeah, and Duo is like $3 a month or something per user. So you implement that. You make sure that your multi-factor authentication is set up on your Office 365 account, and that's no cost. So it's minimal to do it these days. It's not as expensive as companies believe it to be.
The cost is, from a remote work perspective, you've got to really get your team members a work laptop to use at home. If you want to it's going to increase your security by a lot. I'd say 95%, right? The problem you have with remote work is when you start blending. So somebody's using a shared computer, as you've mentioned, Paul, that kids have been on, or whatever's been going on that machine could be infected. Someone jumps on there, taps in a password to their work environment, and that's how things happen. So, from an expense, if you're going to have people working from home regularly, you got to get them a laptop.
Yeah, we've done that. And I mean, look, the hardware's not as expensive as it used to be, obviously, and we've just undertaken the task of, every team member now in our organisation has a new laptop. And everyone's with the same laptop. It's they've set it up all the same, and so we're from an ease of work perspective, because of now this blend between 3 days at work, 2 days at the office, or 4 and 1, 5 and 2, or 9 and 1 over a fortnight, whatever it is, the case may be. We're now creating an environment where these machines are somewhat cloned, whereas I can grab my laptop and sit 100 meters down the road, or 100 meters, sit 50 meters down that way, or I could sit in my office, or I could sit in someone else's office. I can take my laptop, go into the boardroom, go into a meeting room, and it's me. And, so that's from an ease perspective. But I think also, Jamie, is probably important, and listening to both you and Zahn, one of the things that we need to do in our organisation is update our policies and procedures. I think we need to communicate that and explain to our team members the importance of you use your work laptop for work-related activity and behaviour, and your personal laptop or your personal PC or whatever, you do that for personal stuff. And that's not us saying that we're tight asses or anything like that. That is just a pure risk mitigation, a practice protection piece that protects us, protects all the other team members, protects our clients, protects our data and our clients' data. I think that's important that we put that in place in our organisation, and I'm sure a lot of us will benefit from that.
Yeah, it's interesting, Jason, you mentioned that. We engaged with a large accounting firm in Sydney recently. And the philosophy behind accessing your systems in the past used to be, I want to give my staff flexibility. I want to give them mobility. I want to make sure they can access it from anywhere at any time, be in the cloud. They've shifted their mindset towards the fact that, yes, we'll give you that flexibility. You can access it anywhere at any time from your laptop only, nowhere else.
Yeah.
So here's your laptop, go home, work from there, go to Bali, visit Jamie. But if you want to work from there, make sure you've got your work laptop there, because we control that environment. We can lock it down from that perspective. So they've changed the approach a little bit, which is quite an interesting way of doing it. And I do feel there's a lot of companies that's going to be heading more in that direction, in the sense of work laptop, only way you access our environment.
So we spoke about, as an example, we spoke about emails, and I think Jamie's top 3 was emails. Now, put that into a little bit of a practical, what you guys were just talking about then with laptops. I've got my laptop here. I've got my email address on here. I also have my Gmail account on here as well, which is my personal. How do you stop people from doing that?
So Jamie's got loads of ways of doing that.
Be done technically. If you've given them the tools and they've got a work laptop, you can stop them from being able to log in on other devices.
Right. Okay. And is that the same for phones? Is there more likely to, because obviously everyone's got emails on their phones now. It's on our iPads, it's on our phones, it's on every bloody thing. It's on our watches. Is it the same sort of thing that you got to still have that across the board?
Yeah, and if you've got Practice Protect, you can, yeah.
Okay.
So there we go. That's 38 minutes before you got the plug in, Jamie. That's pretty good for me. I respect you holding on for that long. I mean, that's because when Zahn was saying, oh, you know, if you can decide to go off and see Jamie in Bali, I would have mentioned maybe give yourself 5 days annual leave once you've come back from Bali after spending that time with Jamie.
I'm actually, it's been a while, Jason. I'm not that bad anymore.
Yeah?
Since I haven't caught up with you.
So they're running out of Bentangs.
whether you're let's say you've got an internal, because it's important here, because I know I've been talking to my IT guys internally here as well, and whether you've got your internal IT guys or whether it's an externally using someone like a CT Group, which is Zahn's company. What are the key things that some of our firms need to be aware of? And it's something that, to be fair, I can't see too many accountants, and Jace, no disrespect, and you can jump in here definitely, but it's probably not something on your radar to continually be aware of.
Now, can I tell you, before Zahn answers that question, previously we weren't, but now it's such an important aspect of the way we work. And JMO mentioned earlier about creating an efficient workforce. It is, our IT providers and the hardware we use are significant stakeholders in our business. And as much as it shits me, and it does, but we've got to pay a lot of attention to it. So, yeah, I think it's becoming more and more prevalent and more at the front of the accountant's mind than it has previously. Zahn.
Yeah, look, I think that's important. And we spoke about that briefly as well when I touched on the user training and the, awareness from a user perspective to make sure that, they're informed. It's a partnership between the IT consultant or the IT partner, the software providers that the companies use. It's a collaboration approach between them and the partners at the firm, and then from the partners with the staff, to ensure that they educated and you train them and they're part of that change management and they're part of that journey. One of the things that, there's a couple of things that our guys are really concerned about that they see in the sector, and we've touched on both of them, funnily enough, during this. One of them is I would say the uneducated cyber criminals, if you like, the ease of access they've got to sophisticated technology to deploy ransomware. They can go and buy this for $100, the software, because the guys who actually write this code, they try and make money from that as well. Yeah. So they'll buy it and then go, let me go and test it on the market and see what I can do.
Yeah.
So to get access to that for these guys is so easy. And as Jason mentioned, they sit in those massive high tower block in some country, and they all just pass their codes around. So for them to get access to it is very easy. And when they get access to something like that, as we've seen in the recent Microsoft Exchange vulnerability, is that they expose it on a massive scale. So their impact is huge. It's not just one bank, it's thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of businesses and users. So that's one key thing. The other thing as well is those sleeper viruses, so to speak. where they gain access to the environment, they monitor it, they watch it before they trigger anything. You know, I spoke to a company the other day where they got access to the system, and then what they've done is they actually sat there and waited. They deleted the backup virtual machines, and then they triggered the ransomware. So what happened is that company couldn't revert to the backups because the guys deleted the backups,
Shifting,
and then triggered the ransomware, and they had no choice to pay the ransomware.
Mm.
So it's that what we call sleeper virus, so to speak, where they sit there and wait for the right information. Some of the insurance guys will tell you as well, they know exactly what your claim limit is because they've filtered through your information. And then when they trigger that ransomware, they say, we know your policy covers you for this much, we expect this much.
Yeah, right. Wow.
So those are the two scary things that our guys are kind of aware in the market. And the best way to do it is that obviously from a systems perspective, and like, you know, someone like Practice Protect have that in place. Plug for you as well, Jamie, from my side, 4 minutes later, is have that. And then also that user training aspect. You know, that's the key thing there.
Zahn, you're just saying, I'm just reading the comments from Sam. And one of the points that Sam makes is downtime in our industry is a very costly exercise. For every hour we're down, that hurts us. And you know, it hurts us in lost productivity, if you like, but it also, you know, a lot of our team members will make up the time. They get frustrated. They get frustrated with us. You know, what are you guys doing? And so I think, you know, when you look at costs, you've got to look at the, you know, the opportunity cost or the downtime. I wanted to ask a question about what your position is, and I'm happy to hear various different sides of the argument. What's your position on having a dedicated line to your own cloud server as opposed to just tapping into, you know, Amazon's cloud and all that sort of stuff? Have you got a position either way on that?
I do. I think that if you look at how much money is being spent by these cloud providers, you know, whether that's a private cloud provider such as ourselves, or we can't compete with the Azures and the Amazons of the world, you know, that's for sure. But those guys spend millions and millions and millions and billions of dollars on their infrastructure, their security, the software they deploy on it. I think that you're in a very safe position when you are in that environment with those guys. Don't get me wrong, whichever way you go with, you still need to make sure that you have the correct policies in place and procedures in place, and you've activated all the security protocols that surrounds that. That is your multi-factors, your 2 factors, etc.
I think I know what you're saying about that connection to the data center, Jason, and the answer there is it's changed dramatically in the last few years. That whole space, where you're paying huge bucks for links to data centers, has dramatically commoditized in the last couple of years. And Paul mentioned you're looking at things at the moment, and that's something you should be going and having a look at, because there's a lot of old contracts out there that people are still paying too much, just paying 3 to 5 years ago prices on.
And is there options to get out of those prices? I'm not saying I'm one of them, but there's every chance that I could be. You know, but there's opportunities to get out of those contracts where you've been stitched, paying probably overs.
It depends on the contract and how long you've been in it for.
Yeah, cool.
But a majority of them will renegotiate for a lower fee at the latest rates for another 3-year term or so, because that is a commodity, as Jamie mentioned.
Guys, there's something that you can comment on in terms of the easiest thing, and I know you guys have mentioned it before, is to go and talk to your PI provider and have cyber insurance included into your policy, and it's not that much more to have it included into your policy. Are there certain protocols, and I think you mentioned it before, maybe Jamie, you did, about what a firm then should be doing, not just saying, oh, great, we've got insurance, so that's okay. What more, apart from that, from an insurance point of view, would they want to make sure that payout takes place? Is that something anyone can comment on?
Yep. I'll go quickly. So training, showing your staff what not to do, so that you've got something to back that document you're asking them to sign up. And then also there's tools such as Zahn Nel, a good one called Nova 4, where you can actually engage with a couple of bucks a month per user, and it's actually a tool that'll try and trick your team, and it sort of gamifies it. So it'll put up a dashboard in your office, or not, you know, on a screen, where you can see who's fallen for it. And it's funny, it really gamifies it for everyone. You know, they'll send the same attack to everybody in the firm, and there'll always be 1 or 2 people that fell for it. And
Yeah.
it's really embarrassing for them. And it makes everyone super aware.
Yeah, it's good. It's the old way, just shaming employees into, it's really good. That's almost called workplace bullying where I'm from, Jomo. Done it again. Cunningham's back on the dark web. Eh?
Exactly right. And from a training point of view, is it just a matter of keeping a record, or should it be recorded like we are now on Zoom? Or
Yeah, well, I'm not going to look. It's something we do. It's Practice Protect. Sorry, it is a plug, but it answers the question. And so there's a CBP, Cloud Best Practice certification that you get, and it tells you who. You also get CBD points for the training. So you track who's done the training, and that's something you can show to your cyber insurer.
okay.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, Jamie, it's pretty surprising not to see you in a Practice Protect t-shirt, which I normally do.
The logo's down low. I can't quite make it.
Yeah, I recently did a webinar with the insurance guys, and there were 10 or 11 key questions that they asked on aspects that they want to see to be implemented. Not all of those 11 obviously needs to be in, because there's some of them that's really, quite technical, like application whitelisting as an example, that, takes a bit of work to do. But what those guys are saying that the two key things that they're now requesting on that is the user training is definitely the key one. And a lot of firms are now also, like a lot of those underwriters, two-factor authentication. Like if there's not 2FA in the system, your chances, they're getting it to the point to say that's a prerequisite. Otherwise, you won't be able to get insured. So, yeah.
What I'm hearing from you guys is there's probably 3 or 4 pieces to this. The first is obviously to have the right or relevant organisation have a look at your protocols and have a look at your system, conduct a bit of an audit and say, oh, look, this is best practice. That's the first thing. The second thing is around policies and procedures that you disseminate amongst your team. The third piece is around training and development of your team members and keep bringing it to front of mind. And I think the fourth thing where a lot of it happens is this human error. I clicked on this or I did this or whatever. And one of the ways around that is to bring it back to the human element. And one of the things that we're trying to do in our organisation is really encourage our team members to pick up the phone and ring clients. Imagine that. Imagine having conversations with your customers. I know for the most part that it's not necessarily in the accountant's DNA to actually speak to anyone, and we'd prefer to just tap away at our emails. But one of the challenges that I keep having with our team members is, where's this job at? Oh, Jason, it's at query stage. I'm like, what the fire hell truck does that mean? Pick up the phone. I sent them an email. I go, yeah, that's good. Jamie's a roof plumber. And so he's not necessarily sitting there on his laptop waiting for an email from you. Pick up the phone. So it's really encouraging us to get our team members to engage with our customers and talk to them and moving them away, because it's easy to send an email.
Yeah.
It's easy to send, oh, we've done the job. Here's the completion documentation. We've compiled it all, and here's a bill and DocuSign and blah, blah, blah. If we're trying to move into to this advisory space where we're having conversations with our customers and our clients see value in what it is that we do, I think the more times we're talking to them and the more conversations we're having with them, the better it is for us. And so it could be a way to really encourage our team members to make phone calls.
Yeah.
Agree totally. So to everyone that's online, if you've got questions, I know there's some great comments in there as well. And Stan, thanks for that. Before. So just, if you've got comments or questions you want to ask anyone, please do so. I think last week the federal government announced a $1.7 billion cybersecurity strategy. So I think,
that'll be spent quite efficiently by the government.
No doubt.
No doubt. But this is probably a good way to, in summary, just bring a few of those key things.
Is that know before that Stan put up in the question? Is that the gamification stuff you're talking about, Jamie?
Yeah.
The staff humiliation tool.
If you want to make it public.
Yeah.
It all depends on how you sell it to them. So
it's in the
it helps. It really does. It motivates people.
Yeah. Okay. Is that expensive or?
No, it's really cheap.
It's
a couple of bucks per user per month. But I'm not sure. Zahn, have you got the exact pricing there? I'm not sure.
No, I don't have the exact pricing of it, but yeah, it's not an expensive at all.
It's not significant.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Very clever though, and I love the gamification side of it. So if there's some stuff coming through, please shoot through any questions. We've got about 9 minutes to go before we wrap up. So probably just in wrapping up. So are there some key things, I suppose, Zahn, that you'd like to start with? There you go. Someone just said, Stan just said $4.
There we go.
Is
that US? or what's the thing in Bali again? Rupiah?
US. So from a strategy point of view, to help all of our, again, Jace, he's going to do it with the practice. So so your top 3 or top 5 to make sure everyone must do as well as be aware of.
Yeah, look, I think we spoke about this quite a few times now already about this user training, and I don't want to be a broken record, but it really is at the top of my list when it comes to it. Very close second, or combined with that first one, would be 2-factor authentication. So from a technical perspective, if you want to ask me, those things would make such a significant difference to any business. I think it's really important for that staff awareness training and continuously educating your staff. That's going to win you so much of this battle. The 2-factor authentication is a given. 90% of software companies these days will actually deploy it only with a 2-factor authentication. So I think as I mentioned as well, the cyber insurance companies, they actually want that to be a prerequisite these days. So those would be my 2 key top takeaways for firms. There are a few other things as well that I would think is worth looking into that I wouldn't mind mentioning. There's a essential 8 guidelines from the ACSC, which is the Australian Cybersecurity Centre. Those essential 8 guidelines, anyone can take that to their IT firm and say, look, here's the guidelines that we need to follow, like essential guidelines. What do we do within this? It's got a low, medium, and a high rating on it for various bits and pieces. And then you work practically through that. Obviously, implementing everything is not always possible, and it prevents you from doing certain things. So that's a good guideline to follow for anyone to make sure the company is well protected. And then the other thing is really look at investing in heuristic behavioral antivirus. So that AV is a bit more smart. It's like an AI-based type of AV antivirus. As an example, what that does is, give you an example, it would detect a large number of files change in a very short time frame. So what would happen with something like a ransomware is it starts encrypting the files and it massively locks it and it changes that file.
Yeah.
So what this antivirus system does is it actually monitors that. If it sees such a big change in such a short time frame, it kills the process.
Yeah, right.
So that type of antivirus, and it's minimal cost, you're talking, $9-10 $10 a month type of thing per user. So yes, I know it all adds up. That's what a lot of the clients are saying. Yes, it's $3 there, it's $5 there, it's $9 there, it's $10 there. Before you know it, I'm paying. Oh, and the Office 365 is another $40.
Yeah.
It's $100 a user a month. But when you add all those things on, you do actually have a much better secure environment, and compare that to the cost to the company if something goes wrong.
Hey, thanks for that, Zahn. That's a good summary. I wanted to ask Big Jomo there, sweating it out in Bali. Probably, I'm tipping, do you have shoes on, Jamie, just out of interest? Or no, no. What you touched on a point earlier about one of the challenges that we're faced with is the various different passwords that we've got for various different applications and our online banking. And I'm sure some of us, not this person, but some of us use the same password for everything. And that's just a massive risk. And the IT guy just nearly had a heart attack. So best protocol, best processes, they have various different passwords, change them all the time and all that sort of stuff. And that sounds wonderful in theory, right? Yeah. And then we get to a practical perspective, and it's a challenge. Is there a way where you can house all your different passwords somewhere, and you've got one password to access them, and then you only have to change this one? What are the protocols around that, and can we tap into software and all that sort of stuff?
Sure. So there's a couple of ways. Everyone in the firm has one single identity, right? So you don't have a list of passwords. You have one set of credentials. You log in through one doorway, and then you access everything.
Yeah.
Now that everything that's in there is cloud apps, it's your email, it's your server, and it's your desktop, or whatever it is, okay? Now there's technologies now where all of those things are, instead of having their own password, it's actually going to that identity system and authenticating against that. Mm-hmm. So it's about simplifying it. Yes, you will update a password every 30 days if it's just one.
Yeah.
and it gets you into everything. It's actually sets you free, right? Because you don't have all of these password sprawl going on.
Yeah, that sounds quite liberating to me. So you're saying that I go into one now. You know, I'm not terribly tech savvy. You know, I was probably the last bloke on earth to have a BlackBerry before I moved across to the iPhone. So you're saying you go into one sort of gateway and everything's stored that way, yeah?
Yeah, and it's especially relevant to accounting firms like yourself, Jason, where a lot of your stack now is in the cloud. You know, back in the 5-10 years ago, everything was tucked around a server and you log into that server. That's not the case anymore because you've got all these cloud apps and you're often accessing bank accounts or other apps on behalf of your clients as well. Yeah. So getting that all into that single page is like a cloud desktop.
Yeah.
It's actually, like I say, making it easy for people allows them to make it more secure for you.
Okay, so excuse my ignorance. What if someone hacks that one gateway then and they've got access to that then on Cactus?
Good question. You've got to put a lot of controls around it, so without making it difficult for the user. So first of all, multi-factor is essential.
Yeah.
Then a whole lot of restrictions. So some firms will want to restrict team members to their home office and the office. Limiting to Australia only is a really good one.
Yeah, right.
And there's a whole lot of controls and policies. So 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., all sorts of different policies you can put around that. So it is really tightly controlled.
Yeah, cool. Thanks. That's
actually very.
Yeah,
no, that's brilliant. I think some of the stuff you just mentioned there, outstanding. So I've just got a question here from Lynn. She's saying, so are you saying things like Lastpass are not relevant anymore? Now, hopefully you guys know what that is.
I know what a hall pass is.
Have you got one before?
No comment.
No comment.
Okay.
What's Lastpass, Zahn?
It's a database where you store all your multiple passwords. So this issue that we have with everyone having, you know, like all the passwords and stuff, it's a secure way of storing all of your passwords and access to it. And it also integrates with your login credentials where it saves it and you don't have to type it back out again, your username and password. So it's a password bank, basically.
Right, okay.
So to speak. Yeah, look, this probably will become less and less important if you have a central point of access, you know, through something like Practice Protect.
I think one of the important points that Janso and I are trying to raise, or the awareness we're trying to raise, is that you really need to bring in the experts that practice in this space every day, and that's what we've tried to do today with Zahn and Jamie, is just to give our members and the viewers of this humble little show access to people that do operate this space all the time. So on behalf of myself, thanks very much for that. I think it's good. And Jamie, did you put a policy up in the chat box there about policies that we can use? Can we just?
Yeah, there's an example there. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, mate.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So hopefully everyone's got that, although I will copy and paste that, and I can always send that out to people.
Yeah, thanks.
If they need that, I'll just put that into my running sheet here.
Look,
and I concur, gents. Thank you very much. You know, we try and every single month, this show is just, we use it as an education platform. We wanted to expand on that. So thank you very much, Jamie. Thank you very much, Zahn. I know you guys, we're 2 hours in front of you both. So we tried not to make it too early for you guys. Although, Jamie, you were up very early yesterday, so I won't tell people what you told me, but it was good. So it's a pleasure to have you guys on here to share, educate. There's a lot of things around this that we want to continually educate firms about and just to be aware of. And I think, if there's one thing, if you guys are continuing, the firms continuing to have board meetings every month or management meetings every month, have risk management at the top of that and continue to review your policies to make sure that you've got that and you're talking to it about other partners, team members, and then bringing the experts. I agree 100%. I'm just going to there's a couple of questions here. Maybe no, just thank yous. Yeah, beautiful. To everyone on the line, again, thank you for joining us. It's been a great hour of power. I do have an invitation coming to you guys about our next virtual lunch. So my next virtual lunch is all about women in accounting, and it's a great little topic that we'll be talking about. So if you're free on June 10 and you're free to join us for 12 p.m. with a glass of wine, you're more than welcome to jump on here. So we'll get you out an invite shortly. Otherwise, to the rest of you guys, Jamie, thanks, mate. Zahn,
Cheers,
thanks.
guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for coming in. Thanks.
See
Enjoy
ya.
the rest of your day. Stay safe.
Cheers,
Thanks,
Jim.
guys. Cheers. You
Bye,
too.
guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.